So who I am is I am a God, and through my thoughts, feelings, and words, I create the reality in which I live in. I'm not the God, I'm not your God, I'm A. If I had a pet, and I said this pet was made in the image and likeness of a turtle, what kind of pet would I have? A turtle. I have a pet, and it's made in the image and likeness of a golden retriever, you would say I have a golden retriever. So if I'm made in the image and likeness of the God, I can't create the heavens and stars of the universe, but God said I should have dominion over the earth. I should be able to create the way in which I want to domain here on earth. That's my God-given power. And it's through my thoughts, feelings, and words that I create that. I'm not to be worshipped by anybody, but I'm supposed to use what my Creator gave me, the essence that I'm part of, this infinite intelligence that I come from, to create the way in which I want to domain here on earth.
Before the name Africa, Africa was called Al-Kebulan.
What does the word Al-Kebulan mean?
Which means mother of mankind.
Oh.
So other nations are from Africa. Even if you are of what race, what nation, you are from Africa.
African queens who fought against colonization and enslavement? These weren't just rulers. They were defenders and strategists who risked everything to protect their people from foreign powers. In the 1600s, Queen Nzinga of Ndongo went head-to-head with the Portuguese, using diplomacy, warfare, and strategy to keep her kingdom free for over 30 years. But her name isn't in most history books. Or take Queen Yaa Asantewaa. In 1900, when the British tried to seize the Ashanti's golden stool, she led her people into battle, defending their kingdom's most sacred symbol. So why isn't her story celebrated? Centuries earlier, Queen Amina of Zazzau expanded her empire through conquest, fortifying cities to protect her people. Yet, her legacy is rarely mentioned. These queens defied colonizers and kept their people free. Their courage lives on if we're willing to tell it. Know their names. Share their stories. They are history's hidden warriors.
Hidden within these beautiful and intricate braids lies a powerful secret from history. During the dark days of slavery in America, braids were more than just a hairstyle. They were a lifeline, a coded map, and a beacon of hope. Enslaved Africans ingeniously used braids to encode escape routes, landmarks, and safe houses. Cornrows in particular served as covert maps. Their tight, close to the scalp designs could outline the terrain, point to water sources, and signal safe passages. Today, braids are celebrated for their beauty and cultural significance. But let us also remember their incredible legacy as tools of survival and symbols of resistance.
Man saved Islam. King Najashi of Abyssinia, the Christian monarch whose act of justice helped save Islam. When Prophet Muhammad's followers fled Mecca, seeking refuge from brutal oppression, it was King Najashi who welcomed them with open arms, offering sanctuary and protection in his kingdom. Despite immense pressure from Qurayshi emissaries seeking their extradition, Najashi listened to their plea, profoundly moved by the commonalities between Christian and Islamic teachings. King Najashi's story is a powerful testament to the strength of faith and the universal values of humanity and justice.
Alessandro de' Medici, also known as Il Moro, the Moor, was born in 1510 in Florence, Italy, to an African woman named Semineta and an Italian nobleman named Giulio de' Medici. Alessandro grew up in the Medici family's palaces and was educated in the arts and sciences. He showed a talent for military strategy and was appointed captain of the Florentine army at the age of 19. In 1530, after the death of his cousin, Alessandro became the ruler of Florence. His reign was marked by a period of stability and prosperity for Florence. Despite his accomplishments, he faced opposition from some members of the Medici family, who resented his mixed ancestry and claimed he was not a legitimate heir of the Medici legacy. In 1537, Alessandro was assassinated in a plot conceived by his cousin, Lorenzino de' Medici, who lured him to his residence and murdered him with the aid of an accomplice.
In the heart of the Mediterranean lie Sardinia and Corsica, two islands with a rich history symbolized by their striking Moorish flags. The Sardinian flag, known as the Four Moors, originates from the Aragonese conquest. It represents victory over the Moors. Corsica's flag features a symbol of defeat, the headband moved above the eyes to signify freedom, reflecting Corsica's fight. The Moor's head symbolizes the medieval conflicts between Europeans and Moorish forces, embodying the victory over the Moors after 700 years of Moorish rulership.
Europeans would imitate the Moors, and they had set a party forth, was known as the Whigamore Party. This is where Europeans would wear the curly wig.
Pope Miltiades, born in Africa and served as Pope of Rome from 311 to 314 AD. Under his guidance, the Church embraced a new era of tolerance with the issuance of the Edict of Milan in 313 AD by Emperor Constantine and Licinius. He also helped the Church emerge from the shadows, allowing Christians to practice openly without fear of persecution. His leadership during this critical period helped to stabilize and strengthen the Church, setting the stage for its eventual emergence as the dominant religion of the Roman Empire. Pope Miltiades played a key role in the development of the Christian Church in Rome, and was remembered for his piety and wisdom.
Saint Calogero, born in 5th century AD, was a monk venerated as a saint by the Catholic and Orthodox Church. Born into humble beginnings, he devoted his life to spreading the teachings of Christianity and providing solace to the oppressed. Renowned for his miraculous deeds and unwavering faith, he became a beacon of hope for the people of Sicily. He is the patron saint of Agrigento, a city in Sicily where he is venerated with great devotion. Today, his feast day is celebrated annually with religious processions and festivities.
The most important Roman, I would argue, who actually ever came to Britain was the African emperor, Septimius Severus. He was one of the greatest Roman emperors. So he was born in North Africa in AD 145. He was a warrior. He came here to Britain in AD 208. He got a message from the governor, and the governor said that we here in Britain are being attacked from the north and we're in danger of being overrun. The first thing he does is have them build the walls of Roman London. Wow. So the city of London, to this day, the square mile is defined by the African Emperor Septimius Severus. If you walk into the reception area of the British Museum, the first bust you see is a bust of Septimius Severus, alabaster white, but actually when he was in real life in the Roman world, it would have been painted as he was, a man from North Africa. This is a man who's there all the time. He's right in front of us all the time in the British Museum, but nobody knows unless you dig into the story that he was a warrior emperor from North Africa who stayed true to his own heritage.
Abram Ganable, a kidnapped African prince who rose to prominence in 18th century Russia. Born in 1696 in what is now Ethiopia and Eritrea, Abram was kidnapped as a child and taken to Constantinople. In 1704, he was sent as a gift to Peter the Great of Russia, who baptized him and became his godfather. Ganable quickly became a favorite of Peter the Great due to his intelligence and charm, excelling in military sciences, mathematics, and engineering. His most notable accomplishments include fortifying the Russian borders and overseeing important construction projects, such as the Ladoga Canal. He eventually rose to the rank of Major General and was granted estates where he lived as a nobleman. His great-grandson, Alexander Pushkin, is one of Russia's greatest poets and the founder of the modern Russian language.
The Ethiopian slave who became the ruler of India and a shrewd statesman in the Deccan region in the 16th century. Malik Ambar was a brilliant strategist. He innovated guerrilla warfare tactics, which later influenced the Marathas. Ambar also excelled in administration. He overhauled the revenue system of Ahmadnagar, making it more efficient and fair. He founded the city of Kadgi, which he made his capital, and which later became known as Aurangabad. Malik Ambar's legacy is a testament to his leadership and his ability to transcend the constraints of his origins to profoundly impact the history of the region.
King who sailed to the Americas nearly 2 centuries before Christopher Columbus. In the year 1311 AD, a remarkable journey unfolded on the West African coast. Mansa Abubakari II ruler of the thriving Mali Empire, embarked on a bold expedition across the Atlantic Ocean in search of uncharted territories. They reached the shores of the Americas, specifically modern-day Brazil, where they were met by curious natives eager to understand these foreign visitors. They quickly began exchanging goods and cultural knowledge, with the gold-tipped spears brought by the Africans proving particularly sought after. Mansa Abubakari's arrival in the Americas challenges the Eurocentric narrative of Columbus's discovery of the Americas.
The goat herder that discovered coffee in the high mountains of Ethiopia. One day, Kaldi noticed that his goats were acting strange. They were jumping and running around with so much energy. Kaldi soon discovered that they had been eating the bright red berries from a nearby shrub. He chewed on a few of the berries and almost instantly felt an intense burst of energy and alertness. Kaldi was so excited about his discovery that he ran down the mountain to the local monastery to share the news with the monks. They were so amazed by the effect by the berries that they decided to start boiling them in water to make a drink. The drink quickly spread throughout the region and soon became a staple drink all around the world.
How the Mayans did stuff with their teeth. So, oh yeah, just nothing like a hammer chisel right to the teeth. Okay, and so apparently they would drill these holes just deep enough to be able to sock in these gemstones. Now, I don't know how in the world they would have taken these gemstones and actually got them to stick, maybe with some cement. They used some type of cement to get on there, but then wouldn't the cement just kind of stick through? But the crazy part is that's not the only thing they did. Yes, they did adorn their teeth with different gems in the Mayan culture, and actually they found skulls with these gems inside of it. That's how we kind of know what happened here. But they also had the very first type of braces. A lot of people don't know that they were kind of some of the very first people that understood dental restorations, and they would take their old teeth and they would actually stick them back up in the holes, and they would use these gold wires that they would draw out, and they would wrap these gold wires all around their teeth because they knew gold was bioinert to your body. It didn't cause an infection like other metals did.
The African that became a samurai with the highest honor in the 16th century, Yasuke arrived in Japan from modern-day Mozambique as a servant to Jesuit missionaries. His towering height and remarkable strength captivated the locals. Word of Yasuke reached the powerful warlord Oda Nobunaga, who was so impressed that he made Yasuke a samurai, an unheard of honor for a foreigner. Yasuke served Nobunaga loyally, fighting in crucial battles during Japan's tumultuous Sengoku period. Today, he's remembered as a symbol of strength, loyalty, and cultural exchange.
They've hidden this from the world. Africans were present in South America 3,000 years ago. This is changing everything we know about our ancient past and who our ancestors really were. The Olmecs, who lived in present-day Mexico around 1200 BCE, the first civilization to create colossal stone heads, some weighing well over 20 tons. That's 20 small cars. They all depict faces with distinct African features. Columbus was not the first to contact the Americas. There was transoceanic contact or travel long before him. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The Olmecs, like many other civilizations during their time, had a profound understanding of astronomy and mathematics. They created one of the earliest known calendars and used a complex mathematical system that even predated the Maya. The Olmecs were also master engineers, even by today's standard. They built sophisticated drainage systems and used techniques we don't understand today to transport massive stones over great distances. Here's the next level of the iceberg. The artifacts found in Olmec sites are strange figurines and tools made from materials not native to the region. This proves an ancient, wide-reaching trade network. Some of these items connect to ancient cultures in Europe and Asia. The symbols and writing found on their artifacts are still undeciphered to this day, but they bear a striking resemblance to other ancient writings around the world. This leads us to believe that there was a global network of ancient advanced societies.
My name is Maxwell Sangulani Chikumbutso. God has given me something that is going to change the world.
The world told him it was impossible. Scientists scoffed, corporations dismissed him, and even his own life was threatened. But Maxwell Chikumbutso, a high school dropout from Zimbabwe, refused to be silenced. Let's take a closer look at some of his most remarkable inventions and how they can positively impact the entire continent and the world at large. The wireless self-powered television. Chikumbutso once showcased a television set that does not require external power.
So this is the first television in the world that uses self-power to say. It is all in one. You don't need to put it on electricity or on solar panel or anything. As it is a complete solution. Behind the television, you can see that there is a microsonic energy device, this box. This is the device that is converting radio frequencies into pure energy. As you can see, the power of the cable was supposed to be here. On all traditional televisions, power comes here, but there's no power, as you can see. The television is working as it is. So in layman, I think this television is we can call it a self-powered television.
Next, we have the Green Power Off-Grid machine. This is another groundbreaking invention by Maxwell that generates electricity using the same microsonic principle.
What we're looking at is called the Green Power Off-Grid machine. It is 0.5 megawatts, and we are relying with the radio frequency. Behind this radio frequency converted into pure energy that is useful.
Now let's talk about the self-sustaining racing motorbike. Alongside the Kayi Scythe, Chikumbutso introduced a high-performance racing motorbike that also runs on microsonic energy. This motorbike does not need fuel or recharging and has been designed for both racing and commercial use. Currently, there is no official price release for the racing bike, but its affordable production cost means it could become widely accessible in Africa and beyond. Now, let's look at the elephant in the room, the self-powered electric car, the Kayi Scythe. The Kayi Scythe, developed in partnership with Chinese automaker Kayi, is a testament to Maxwell's ingenuity. While the specifics of his microsonic energy technology remain undisclosed due to some concerns, the car's potential is undeniable. These cars boast several remarkable features that set them apart from conventional electric vehicles. Perhaps the most revolutionary is its unlimited driving range. Unlike traditional electric cars that rely on charging stations and have limited mileage before needing a recharge, the Kayi Scythe continuously powers itself using Chikumbutso's proprietary microsonic energy technology. This eliminates the range anxiety that plagues many electric vehicle owners and makes long-distance travel a seamless possibility. Adding another layer of practicality, the Kayi Scythe features a home power supply capability. Similar to Tesla's Powerwall technology, the car can act as a backup power source for a household. In the event of a power outage, or even as a regular supplement to a home's energy needs, the Kayi Scythe can seamlessly switch to powering lights, appliances, and other.
The Zulus of South Africa have made a great contribution to Great Britain and to many other military societies. When we look at the creative genius of the British war machines, we are obliged to see the genius of a Zulu general, Shaka. Shaka created a tactic called the horn, sometimes called the W formation. It looked like a crescent with a large body of men in the center. He would send his small groups of men up that horn and then in to attack the enemy from the enemy's flanks. Then he would take the large body of men and throw them against the center of the enemy's forces. Mr. John A. Williams, in a book called Africa, Her Lands and People, who's also the author of a book called The Man Who Cried I Am, a very important book. I would urge every black American to read it today, as soon as you stop watching this program. Mr. Williams said of the flying of this horn, of the W formation, that it was the most important breakthrough in fighting for a people who had only arrows, assegai, swords, long swords and short swords, and their bodies. It was very successful for many, many years. In South Africa, the Zulu people hold a great position. The Zulus, Shaka sent away a group of people to fight the Hottentot, it is said. They got lost, or they were defeated, and they knew better than to come back because Shaka had a policy. He killed anyone that was defeated and their families. So the people stayed and married into the Hottentots. And that's how the language got the Xhosa language. It really is Zulu, but that's how it included those three non-tonal sounds, the X, the Q, and the C.
Dear participants, it is a great pleasure and honor to be gathered here today for the first summit of AES Heads of State. We are grateful to God for allowing this day to happen. and we thank him for everything he has done for us, and will continue to do for the people of AES. I would also like to pay tribute to the people of Niger, who have suffered greatly since the advent of the CNSP, and yet remain resilient. We are grateful to the Nigerians for their warm welcome when we arrived in our homeland. Here you are more than friends and neighbors. You are our brothers and sisters. We share the same blood of the brave warriors who fought and reserved the land we now call Mali, Burkina, and Niger. Our blood also carries the legacy of those warriors who helped the world rid itself of Nazism and other scourges. It carries the blood of those who were enslaved and contributed to the construction of other nations. We should be proud of our heritage and grateful to be citizens of AES. Africa, our continent, has suffered and continues to suffer at the hands of imperialists who see us as slaves. They believe they own our lands and our resources. They have not changed their mindset since the 1960s, when African countries gained independence. They simply placed local puppets in power to serve their interests. These puppets, whom we now call salon slaves, have no dignity, morals, or personality. They are willing to betray their own people to please their masters. They have betrayed us since independence and continue to do so today. They help the masters exploit Africa and keep our wealth in their hands. They strive to live like the masters and always satisfy them. But when it comes to taking responsibility, they refuse to leave. They label us as the poorest countries in the world, but when we ask them to leave, they resist. For example, in Niger, for over 40 years, some countries have been exploiting uranium to produce energy for themselves, while the streets of Ottawa to Paris are illuminated. But in Niger, there is darkness. We must change this narrative and take control of our own destiny. We must unite as AES and stand against the imperialists who continue to exploit us. We have the resources and the potential to thrive, and it is time for us to rise and take our rightful place in the world.
Shout out to Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré. These are the results of their first gold production. This is their first few hundred kilograms of gold that they have produced since Ibrahim Traoré came into power and took over his mining sectors and started controlling his resources, and has kicked several European mining companies out of the country that have not been benefiting the country. He is truly leading by example and is a rebirth of Thomas Sankara, who was all about utilizing the wealth of the land to benefit the people and the economy, and not, accepting imperialists into the country to exploit the resources. So since Ibrahim Traoré, being the youngest president in Africa at the age of 36, has invested in several key sectors like mining, like agriculture, like real estate. We're going to see some major projects coming from him. And they have been really trying to take this brother out. He has over 20 assassination attempts. May the ancestors continue to protect him, because he's truly a force to be reckoned with. I mean, if other African leaders took note and adopted this type of leadership, Africa would be a force to be reckoned with. Okay, so much love to Burkina Faso.
Hold up, what did Elon Musk just say? You said you were up till 4 in the morning?
Yeah, so, actually a little more like 5 in the morning. But,
okay.
We got the XAI data center, or supercomputer center, training from beginning installation to start of training in 19 days, which is the fastest that anyone has ever gotten a supercomputer to train.
And is that in that new building off the side?
That's in Memphis, actually.
It's in Memphis?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's where you were?
Yeah.
I see.
Memphis, the capital of ancient Egypt.
Right. Yeah, you're bringing what?
Perhaps that's where our new God will come from.
Yeah, no.
That's where our new God will come from.
Yeah, kidding. No kidding. Yeah, I wish that was funny. Yeah, okay, so I want to talk to you about alignment.
That was funny.
Yeah, right. And that's where our new God is coming from. No.
When you're favored by God, you're also favored by the devil. He's coming for you too. So you just gotta be strong and stay on the right side. Whose side you gonna go on? He's gonna give you power too. He's gonna get in your head too, but whose side you gonna stay with? You stay with who brought you here. You go home with the guy that brought you to the dance.
The idea that all Africans were one people is a European concept. The reality? Africa is massive, home to thousands of cultures, languages, and ethnic groups. A tribe in West Africa didn't see themselves as the same as a tribe hundreds of miles away. They weren't selling their own. They were selling outsiders, prisoners of war. Let's flip the script. If Ireland invaded Poland, would you say they were attacking their own people just because both are white? No? Then why do people say that about Africa? Because white supremacy flattens every African culture into one label: black.
This is the last surviving film frame of a famous boxing match in 1908, a World Heavyweight Championship, fought in Sydney, Australia between American boxer Jack Johnson and defending champion Canadian boxer Tommy Burns. Johnson won. The fight wasn't even close, and the film displayed signature traits of Johnson's: his habit of taunting his opponents and flashing his famous golden smile while he fought. The reel ends moments before police stepped into the ring and put a stop to it, preventing Johnson from knocking Burns out. This is the night Jack Johnson became the first black heavyweight champion of the world, in front of 20,000 mostly white spectators and, more importantly, motion picture cameras. Copies of the fight film spread throughout Australia within days, replaying Johnson's effortless victory over and over at screening events attended by paying crowds. Pretty soon, that film was seen worldwide. And from the moment Jack Johnson's reign as World Heavyweight Champion began, a target was on his back. Commercial motion pictures and professional boxing both came to prominence around the turn of the 20th century. Boxing's format, short rounds fought in a stationary ring, lent itself well to early film, with its clunky cameras and relatively short film reels. Film companies would travel around the country projecting reels of prize fights in packed theaters and opera houses. Champions were celebrated as heroes, and that's because boxing, going back centuries, has been wrapped up in themes of identity and pride.
Boxers symbolize their communities, not just their national communities, but also their race.
Teresa Runstetler teaches history at American University and specializes in the intersection of race and sport.
They imagine that boxers in the ring, particularly for interracial fights, that they were almost engaged in this kind of Darwinian struggle, fights between white men and black men. They became a kind of metaphor for race relations. So in other words, if a white man won, it would reinforce ideas of white supremacy. But if a black man won, then it would upend ideas of white supremacy.
As professional boxing, or prize fighting, became more popular around the turn of the century, fights pitting black boxers against white boxers were organized at all levels, except for the highest honor in the sport, the heavyweight championship.
There had been a kind of unwritten rule that white heavyweight fighters were not to fight black fighters in title fights.
This de facto line of segregation was called the color line.
And so Jack Johnson, being the best black fighter at the time, struggled to find white opponents.
Johnson, who by 1908 had already defended his separate title of World Colored Heavyweight Champion 17 times, was repeatedly denied a shot at the most prestigious title in the world, until defending champion Tommy Burns accepted his challenge in 1908. And you already know how that turned out.
Burns's defeat at the hands of a black American fighter disrupted that narrative of white supremacy.
You can see this happening in how newspapers framed the fight. Reporting on Johnson was heavily skewed to appeal to white readers, and overwhelmingly drew attention to his race, sometimes before using his name.
Jack Johnson holding on to the heavyweight crown was just not acceptable in an era of white imperialism, Jim Crow, and global white supremacy.
The search for a white heavyweight to take the title back from Johnson began the night he won it. Former heavyweights claimed they would come out of retirement to fight him, and that a white man must hold the title. The most popular choice among promoters and white boxing fans was James Jeffries, a former heavyweight champion who had retired undefeated in 1905 and was named the only hope of the white race. Johnson, for his part, was ready to defend his title against anyone, the retired Jeffries included. Jeffries was out of shape and hadn't stepped into the ring in over 4 years.
They had him believing that if he just trained a little bit and got back in shape, that he could win and get the heavyweight crown back for the white race.
The pressure and the promise of big money worked. Johnson and Jeffries signed a deal, setting a date for the following year. White press coverage leading up to the fight depicted racist cartoons of an overconfident Johnson and predicted his downfall at the hands of Jeffries. This fight, hyped as the battle of the century, was to be a contest of racial supremacy. And, of course, it would all be on camera. The fight was set for July 4th, 1910 in Reno, Nevada, and a massive stadium was constructed, outfitted with 9 motion picture cameras positioned around the ring to document and then commercially distribute the event. On July 4th, Independence Day, over 20,000 spectators crowded inside.
They imagined that this would be the ultimate way to celebrate, to watch Jim Jeffries, their great white hope, beat the crap out of, this uppity, unruly African American who didn't know his place.
Crowds gathered outside in cities all across the U.S., too, and packed into theaters separated by race because of segregation laws in the U.S. to listen to instantaneous telegram updates of every round, waiting to find out if Jack Johnson, who 9 months earlier knocked out challenger Stanley Ketchel so hard he fell down himself from the momentum, would lose his heavyweight title to Jim Jeffries. But, of course, that didn't happen. In the 15th round, Johnson knocked Jeffries down for the first time in Jeffries' career, waited for him to get up, and when he tried, sent him through the ropes. Jeffries' corner helped him to his feet, which technically should have ended the fight, and let the former champ get punched in the face and thrown to the mat one more time before stepping in to call it. Johnson was once again the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and the nation erupted. Violence broke out in American cities, where anxious crowds had been awaiting the news of the fight.
And they call them race riots, but essentially it was white mob violence against African Americans. It became this kind of attempt to put African Americans back in their place.
At least 19 people died the night of July 4th in the violence following the fight, with hundreds more injured. Fear of further unrest led to an immediate attempt to ban the much-hyped Johnson-Jeffries fight film. Black press outlets pointed out the hypocrisy of this ban, like the Afro-American Ledger, which printed, "It was a race question from the start to the finish, for which the Negro was not and is not responsible. The results, riots, deaths, and injuries lie at the door of the white man and his prejudices." The professional world noted that a real fight was advertised and a real fight was had. What more or less could have been expected? Police were instructed to break up screening events.
White authorities were worried about the symbolic implications of the Jack Johnson victory being replayed. They worried that any demonstration of black victory and any demonstration of white weakness or defeat would undercut the narratives of white supremacy, not just in the United States, but in colonies like South Africa, also India, the Philippines.
But the hype that surrounded the fight meant there was no way to completely suppress it.
So it became this kind of Pandora's box, and they tried to shut it. But anytime you make something illegal, you just push it underground. So they criminalized it, but they couldn't ultimately get rid of it.
Congress banned the distribution of all prize-fight films in 1912, citing the race feeling stirred up by the exhibition of the Jeffries-Johnson moving pictures. But by that point, the film was notorious worldwide. It was the most talked about motion picture of its time, and screenings drew crowds for years following the event. Jack Johnson lost the heavyweight title in 1915, after successfully defending it 8 times. His legacy of crossing the color line and becoming the first black heavyweight champion inspired generations after him. This is a picture of one of his greatest fans in 1968, outside of a theater producing a play called The Great White Hope, which was loosely based on Johnson's life. A legendary heavyweight champion who named Johnson as a major inspiration.
And it was in Nigeria. It was the capital city, but they made interconnecting walls that stretched over 10,000 miles. And it was all man-made, and it was like the world's largest structure. But the British destroyed it in 1897 when they were colonizing it. But that's enough wall to circle the United States 3 times.
It says 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China.
How have I never heard of that? That's what I'm saying. Even the people of Nigeria now, they don't even know about it. So like people are trying to like discover more about it to teach them of their ancient culture and stuff.
They started in 800 AD and continued until 1460 AD.
Yeah, they said it took 150 million man hours to build.
Very little remains today. How is that possible?
Because the British destroyed it.
All of it.
Imperialism. Isn't that insane?
That's crazy.
Yeah, never heard of it before.
Hidden deep in the heart of West Africa was a marvel so great, it stretched farther than the Great Wall of China, a structure so massive it remains one of the largest man-made earthworks in history. But today, it is almost forgotten. This is the story of the Great Wall of Benin, a story of genius, of power, and of destruction. Our journey begins over 1,000 years ago in the powerful kingdom of Benin, located in present-day Nigeria. As early as 800 AD, the Obas, or kings of Benin, began constructing an enormous system of walls and moats to protect their city. By the 15th century, during the reign of Oba Eware the Great, 1440 to 1473, the Great Wall of Benin reached its peak, an architectural masterpiece made from earth, wood, and strategic defenses. At its height, the Great Wall of Benin was 16,000 kilometers long, 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China. It enclosed 6,500 square kilometers, making it one of the largest man-made earthworks ever built. Its walls and moats were so intricate that early European visitors called it a wonder of the world. But how was this African engineering marvel constructed? The builders of Benin dug deep trenches using the excavated earth to create towering walls. The deeper the trench, the higher the wall. The result? A defense system that made it nearly impossible for invaders to penetrate. The city's entry points were guarded by massive gates and warriors trained in the art of war. Any enemy foolish enough to enter was trapped within layers of walls and ambushed from above. The Great Wall of Benin was not just a defense structure, it was a symbol of power, a backbone of a thriving civilization. Inside its walls, Benin City flourished. The kingdom became a hub of art, trade, and governance. The famous Benin bronzes, intricate sculptures made of brass and bronze, showcase the city's artistic mastery. For centuries, the kingdom of Benin stood strong until the year 1897. Then came the tragedy. In January 1897, British forces launched a brutal invasion known as the Benin Expedition of 1897. Why? The British wanted to control trade in the region, especially the rich palm oil business. But when a British delegation was ambushed for trying to enter Benin without permission, it gave them the excuse they needed. A force of 1,200 heavily armed British soldiers equipped with Maxim machine guns and artillery descended upon Benin City. The people of Benin fought bravely, but they were no match for British firepower. The Great Wall of Benin was destroyed. The city was burned to the ground. Thousands were killed. And Oba Ovon Ramwen Nogbaisi, the king of Benin, was exiled to Calabar. The British looted thousands of priceless artifacts, including the world-famous Benin bronzes, which are now displayed in museums across Europe. So, what remains of this great African wonder today? Only traces of its former glory. Urbanization, erosion, and time have wiped away much of the Great Wall of Benin. But if you visit Edo State, you can still find remnants of its earthworks, whispers of a lost empire. Despite its destruction, the legacy of the Great Wall of Benin lives on. The Benin bronzes are now at the center of global debates, with Nigeria demanding their return from Western museums. And as historians uncover more of its secrets, one thing is clear: the Great Wall of Benin was a true wonder of the world, built by the hands of African genius. Final thoughts. Why this story matters. History is often written by the victors, and so many great African achievements have been erased, ignored, or forgotten. But now the truth is being uncovered. The Great Wall of Benin was a masterpiece.
Also known as the Edo Empire, was a kingdom located in the southwestern region of what is now Nigeria. 600 years under the Oba dynasty, and around 1,000 more if we count the previous Ogiso dynasty, Benin was one of the longest-lasting states in West Africa, home to a capital city which awed visitors, a system of earthworks rivaling the Great Wall of China in length, and some of Africa's most famous works of art. This kingdom is an underappreciated gem of world history. This video is part 3. First as a confederation of towns and villages, and then as a kingdom known as Igodo Migodo, ruled by monarchs known as Ogisos, or Sky Kings, from around the 1st century BCE. The Ogiso era is a bit like the pre-classical period of ancient Greece, where mythology and fact blend together, and legendary heroes are discussed alongside historical kings. Even toward the end of this period, we have some seemingly mythologized elements, with tales of heroes slaying man-eating beasts. It's only around the 12th century, give or take about a century, depending on the estimate, that Benin begins to transition out of the semi-mythical age, followed by the legendary foundations of the Oba dynasty. It was also during this period that we find the origins for both of the kingdom's popular names, Benin and Edo. So although there's a high degree of continuity between the Ogiso and Oba dynasties, we can consider the break between them to mark the end of Igodo Migodo and the start of Benin. According to the founding legend of the Kingdom of Benin, the Ogiso dynasty ended with a poor king, Owodo, who was exiled after he killed a pregnant woman, a crime considered so dire as to negate royal authority. Owodo's only heir had previously been forced into exile due to a series of circumstances I don't have the time to get into. But the important thing is that, with no available heir to take over as Ogiso, the dynasty ended. In its place, a popular elder was elected head of state, and he ruled without issue for some time. However, when he tried to install his son as his successor, it was met with resistance from the rest of the ruling council of elders. Instead, they reached out to the Yoruba king Oduduwa in the city of Ile-Ife to come lead them. Why exactly they did this isn't fully clear. According to some versions of the story, Oduduwa was actually the exiled son of Owodo, and he was approached to essentially restore the Ogiso dynasty. However, Yoruba accounts firmly disagree with the claim that Oduduwa, considered a founding father of the Yoruba people, was of non-Yoruba origin. Instead, they claim that Oduduwa was simply approached as a respected, militarily powerful ally of Igodo Migodo, who had defended them from invasion in the past. It might have been a situation a bit like the ascension of Riorik in the Kievan Rus, where a confederation of Slavic princedoms invited a foreign warrior to rule over them, knowing that internal rivalries would cause issues if they chose one of their own. In any case, Oduduwa refused the offer himself. Instead, he sent his youngest son, Oramil, in his place. Oramil moved into a palace built for him in Musam and lived there for several years, marrying the daughter of a local noble and having a son. However, throughout this period, his foreign style of governance met with stiff opposition from local nobles. Oramil eventually became frustrated with the resistance. He declared Igodo Migodo to be the land of vexation, or Ile Ibinu. This phrase would be adapted into Ubinu as a name for the land, and particularly its capital city. Oramil renounced his title, arguing that only a child born of local soil and raised in local customs could rule over the land. As such, he installed his native-born son as king in his place, and returned to Yoruba land himself, from which he would go on to found the Oyo Empire, another major state in what would become Nigeria. Oromion's son, who is now known as Eweka, would be raised in Benin by a native mother and native attendants, and could thus be taken as fully belonging to the country. However, he still had a Yoruba father from the great city of Ile-Ife, something which set him apart from his subjects, and aspects of this unique identity would be emphasized throughout the history of Benin as a way of framing the monarch as exceptional. This would form the basis of Benin's dynastic myth, the story which justified the right of their monarchs to rule. Eweka ushered in the beginning of the Oba era, Benin's second monarchical system. In many ways, the Obas represented a return to the norms of the Ogiso era. They retained much of the same symbolism, and styled themselves as semi-divine figures, much like their precursors. Additionally, like with the Ogisos, power was not totally centralized. The Oba sat at the head of the kingdom and held near absolute authority, but everyday governance largely fell to local hereditary nobles. These nobles and the Oba fell into a sort of symbiotic relationship. The Oba's ultimate semi-divine authority meant that his approval granted legitimacy to the authority of the nobles, and the nobles managed the tasks of administering his realm and collecting tribute on his behalf. The nobles also held some collective authority through their council, the Uzama, which was able to check the Oba's power. Additionally, when the Oba died, the Uzama claimed the right to appoint a successor from amongst his sons. Through these privileges, the Uzama was able to wield significant power within the kingdom, sometimes putting them in an antagonistic relationship with the Obas. This situation changed in the 15th century with the ascension of the Oba Owade. Owade had been born as Prince Ogun, third-born son of the Oba Ohen. The decades before his rule saw a great deal of strife between the Uzama and the royal house. First, Oba Ohen was deposed and stoned to death by the Uzama after ordering the execution of a high-ranking noble, with his oldest son, Ogbeka, replacing him. However, Oba Ogbeka also struggled against the Uzama, fighting multiple civil wars against them. Prince Ogun and his younger brother were both exiled, while another brother, Orobiru, succeeded Ogbeka as Oba. After Orobiru died, Ogun's younger brother left his exile to take the throne, and Ogun returned to Ubinu to replace him by force. There's a lot of legend surrounding this event which I won't get into, but one thing I will note is that Ogun was at one point aided by a slave named Edo, who he would later rename the capital after, giving both the Edo Empire and the Edo people that name. Anyway, in 1440, after a difficult struggle that saw much of the city burned down, Ogun claimed the throne, and took on the regnal name Owari, meaning the trouble has ceased, to commemorate his victory. He then took steps to prevent something similar from happening in the future. He stripped the Uzama of their power to appoint Obas, instead introducing a firm system of primogeniture, where the oldest son of the Oba would always replace him. As part of this, he also introduced a new title for eldest sons, Edaikin, as well as the policy of placing these sons in charge of a town to foster their governing skills. He also introduced two new administrative orders, the Erabo Nore and the Erabo Nogbe, made up of officials appointed by and answerable to the Oba alone, who could aid in some of the tasks otherwise assigned to hereditary nobles. With the power of the Oba consolidated, Ewade would go on to do something that earned him the moniker Ewade the Great. It was under Ewade that the Kingdom of Benin truly became an empire. Under previous monarchs, the kingdom had been a city-state, consisting of the capital city and a collection of surrounding villages. Similar to other city-states like those of the Greeks, it existed within a broader cultural cluster, in this case that of the Edo people, but included only one subsection of this broader group. Ewade expanded Benin's authority to the surrounding regions, bringing in other Edo and non-Edo groups, and pushing the borders of the empire to the coast. The empire would roughly double in size once more under Ewade's son, Ozoluwa the Conqueror, who ruled from about 1480 to 1504. The empire would peak in size under Oba Orhogbua, who captured what is now Lagos. Though the core of the empire was Edo, Edo culture was not imposed upon acquired territories, making the empire culturally and linguistically diverse. This linguistic diversity also resulted in the name of the capital city, Ubinu, gradually morphing into Bini, as speakers of different languages coalesced in the city and blended their interpretations of the name. This is the name that would eventually become Benin, and the city is often called Benin City to distinguish it from the kingdom. Ewade is also credited with building the inner wall of Benin City, part of a network of barriers called Iya in Edo, and collectively known as the Walls of Benin in English. Despite this name, the Walls of Benin aren't walls in the standard sense, but earthworks, deep moats paired with artificial hills made from the removed soil, running parallel to the ditches. Within the moats, vegetation is allowed to grow, creating an additional barrier to crossing. From the bottoms of the ditches to the tops of the moats, These earthworks could be as tall as 25 feet in the longer outer walls and 50 feet along the inner wall. At 15 meters long and up to 50 feet tall from the bottom of the ditch to the top of the moat, the inner walls built under Aware would have needed an estimated 5,000 workers working 10 hours each day to finish their ditches within a single 97-day dry season. And that's not counting the time needed to clear land and transport and deposit the soil into heaps. These inner walls make up only a small portion of the Iya as a whole, however. The outer walls are shorter, up to about 25 feet from ditch to peak, but stretch across a much longer length, at approximately 16,000 kilometers long. This makes the Great Walls of Benin one of the largest man-made structures on Earth, only about 5 kilometers shorter than the Great Wall of China, and made with dozens of times the material of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The outer walls are traditionally considered defensive fortifications, as the inner wall was, and attributed to the 13th century Oba Ugula. However, some evidence suggests an earlier or more decentralized origin for these Iya, possibly with a different intention in mind. For more information, I'd recommend checking out Hidden History's video about probably best known for are its Iya, its capital city, and its artwork. We've already discussed the Iya, but there's a lot more to say about those other two subjects. Europeans began establishing trade relationships with the kingdom in the late 15th century, starting with the Portuguese, who were followed by others such as the English and Dutch through the 16th and 17th centuries. Benin was a major early point of contact in West Africa for Europeans, and they even named the surrounding bight for the empire. Side note, the modern-day Republic of Benin takes its name from this bight, hence why there's a country completely distinct from the Kingdom of Benin which shares its name. Many of these visitors were awed by the splendor of Benin City, which they often called Great Benin. One Portuguese source from 1691 describes the city thusly: Great Benin, where the king resides, is larger than Lisbon. All the streets run straight and far as the eye can see. The houses are large, especially that of the king, which is richly decorated and has fine columns. The city is wealthy and industrious. It is so well governed that theft is unknown, and the people live in such security that they have no doors to their houses. A Dutch source from 1668 gives some further details about the organization and architecture of the city. Houses are built alongside the streets in good order, the one close to the other, adorned with gables and steps. They are usually broad with long galleries inside, especially so in the case of the houses of the nobility, and divided into many rooms, which are separated by walls made of red clay, very well erected. The source adds that these walls were kept as shiny and smooth by washing and rubbing as any wall in Holland can be made with chalk, and they are like mirrors. The upper stories are made of the same sort of clay. Moreover, every house is provided with a well for the supply of fresh water. This source further gives us a description of the royal palace. The king's court is square and located in the right-hand side of the city as one enters it through the gate of Gotham. It is about the same size as the city of Haarlem and entirely surrounded by a special wall, comparable to the one which encircles the town. It is divided into many magnificent palaces, houses and apartments of the courtiers, and comprises beautiful and long squares with galleries, about as large as the Exchange in Amsterdam. The buildings are of different sizes, however, resting on wooden pillars from top to bottom lined with copper casks, on which pictures of their war exploits and battles are engraved. All of them are being very well maintained. Most of the buildings within this court are covered with palm leaves instead of square planks, and every roof is adorned with a small spiraled tower, on which cast copper birds are standing, being very artfully sculpted and lifelike with their wings spread. The ending of that quote brings us to the other thing Benin is best known for, its art. Brass casting was a skill first refined in Ile-Ife, where it was used to create lifelike busts of important figures. These techniques probably spread to Benin in the 13th century, but local craftsmen adapted them to their own style. While in Ile-Ife, brass casts were typically depicted with more naturalistic facial features, in Benin, faces were typically depicted in a much more stylized way. Additionally, Benin pioneered cast brass reliefs, the plaques now frequently called the Benin bronzes. These plaques, as described above, decorated the walls of the royal palace and depicted the history and exploit of the Obas. Other art in Benin included cast brass figures of animals such as leopards, a species heavily associated with the Obas, who kept tamed leopards as part of their retinue and claimed the sole right to kill leopards within the kingdom. Across the city, towers were also topped with large casts of birds, as described earlier, and long slithering brass snakes ran down the tiled roofs of these towers. In addition to brass casts, Benin was known for wood and ivory carving. In some cases, entire elephant tusks would be covered in carved images. These would often be placed at altars to past Obas, mounted in stamps made in the likenesses of the Obas whose spirits were believed to reside within them. In other cases, ivory was carved into valuable bracelets or armbands. Pendant masks were another type of ivory carving, represented here by a particularly famous example representing a queen mother, possibly Queen Iria. In this particular example, you can see representations of bearded Portuguese men woven into her hair, showing how these foreign traders were incorporated into the symbology of the Benin Kingdom. It reminds me a bit of Moor's head symbolism in many European countries, which similarly use the exotified image of travelers from a far-off land as a respectable symbol. Unfortunately, much of what we've discussed here either no longer exists or has been scattered far from Benin City. Benin declined in power through the 19th century, though they remained a significant trading destination. By the 1880s, the British, who had gradually established control over much of the surrounding territory in today's Nigeria, became sick of the Oba's protectionist control over trade. While the Oba resisted efforts to make Benin a British protectorate, in 1892 they successfully convinced he and some of his officials to sign a treaty expanding British influence over the empire. Several years later, the British got into a direct conflict with Benin. In 1897, a British delegation attempted to enter Benin City, but their request was denied as a festival was going on at the time. Even so, the delegation continued toward Benin City. Believing that the true intention of the delegation was to stage an invasion and replace the Oba, several generals launched a preemptive attack on them, slaughtering most of the British representatives. The British launched an actual 1,200-man-strong invasion of Benin City in response, labeled the Punitive Expedition. They successfully captured the city and proceeded to loot its treasures and burn the city to the ground. Some of the artwork was given to the British Museum, where it remains today, while the majority was sold off to various buyers. Today, this art remains scattered across the world, from North America to Indonesia. Very little remains in the hands of the Edo people. Benin City would be rebuilt, but not in its original style. Today, few traces remain of the spectacular city which once stood on the site. To avoid ending on a sour note, however, let's mention it was never actually dissolved, and while it is now part of Nigeria rather than an independent nation, it still exists in Edo State, where Obas still rule. Even better news, while the artwork of Benin remains scattered across the world, growing public pressure has resulted in some positive steps towards repatriation, with several museums returning or announcing plans to return artifacts looted from Benin to Nigeria within the last few years. While much of the looted art remains on display or in private hands where it may be difficult to retrieve, some progress has been made towards returning what was stolen, which includes not only artwork that will bring value to Nigeria, but also spiritually significant pieces from altars. Moreover, the more Benin bronzes are returned to a single place, the more we'll be able to reassemble them into their original context as a chronicle of Edo history, an exciting prospect for historians. The Kingdom of Benin remains a fascinating historical state.
What do you mean stop it? Let me do my job. Listen. What do you do? Who do you protect? Who do you protect? The only people you protect are pedophiles. You don't protect anybody. What do you do? Huh? You just want a pedophile go away. All the people don't.
That's mad. He's kicking off, man.
Leave me alone. I'm doing my job. Just try to take off. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Please record. Please record. Why are you waiting? Not waiting. Why are you?